Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stacklehouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse, and this is episode 90. In today's Ask the Coach episode, I'm going to answer a question sent in by Sarah in the UK. She says, "Hi there. I wanted to ask your opinion on FDA medications such as Lyrica, as I hear so much negativity about it being addictive and hard to get off. I would really like to try Lyrica, but I worry about if I ever had to come off of it. I have listened to your story, and I know you tried it, but came off it. I'm just wondering if you would ever do a podcast solely or partially focusing on more medical treatments. Absolutely love this podcast and find you really, really inspiring. I've been listening to all your episodes at night as I fall asleep. I know this is naughty. Anyways, thank you so much. You are truly being so helpful with your podcasts. Love, Sarah from the UK." Thanks so much, Sarah. And I already replied to you and gave you an answer on this, but I could think of a whole lot worse things to fall asleep to than the Fibromyalgia podcast. So a little bit naughty, but not too bad. Now, before I answer Sarah's question, I also want to point you to episode 50, which is another Ask the Coach that answers the question, should I take medication for fibromyalgia? Now, episode 50 addresses a little bit more of the philosophical, maybe, questions of should I take medication or not? Should you take medication for fibromyalgia? Absolutely, there are reasons why you should. Should you not take medication for fibromyalgia? There may also be reasons why you shouldn't. So I suggest checking out episode 50 if you're thinking just in a general sense, should I or shouldn't I? If you're not sure about taking medication because you don't really understand the medication, that's what today's episode is all about. So to answer Sarah's questions, we're going to talk about what these medications do, why they are prescribed for fibromyalgia, and maybe a little bit of information to kind of help you decide if that particular medication is right for you or not. Now, as always, of course, I have to remind you, I'm not a doctor. This is not meant to be medical advice. This is educational only. And of course, you're going to want to talk to your own doctor about what you should or shouldn't take. But hopefully today's podcast episode is going to give you some more information so you can go have that conversation with your doctor and have a little bit more information, understand maybe a little bit more about what your choices are as you talk with your doctor. A couple more notes I want to give you about today. First off, this is actually part of Module 5 of our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor training. Now, that training alone is at least an hour lecture, and it's only one of 9 modules. So obviously, today is just going to be a tiny piece of that. So if you're someone who wants more in-depth information, if you want the other 8 modules, you could consider joining us. You can get information on joining the training program in today's show notes, which is fibromyalgiapodcast.com/90. I also just want to say pain is complicated, and I know this is going to be a little bit of an oversimplification of things, but like I said, this is a part of a much bigger conversation, and so I'm trying to focus in today on the part that answers Sarah's question. Now, with fibromyalgia, we do have 3 medications that have been approved by the FDA here in the U.S. for treating fibromyalgia. Those 3 medications are Lyrica, Cymbalta, and Savella. Now, even with these medications, I just want to say there is no magic bullet. You are never going to find one medication. You're never going to find one treatment that is going to do everything you need it to do to treat your fibromyalgia. In fact, they did a study on this. There was a study done in Italy where they looked at all the different pharmaceuticals available, all of the different medications available for treating fibromyalgia. And in the end, these Italian researchers decided and stated in their study, quote, "No single drug is capable of fully managing the constellation of fibromyalgia symptoms," end quote. So there's no one magic bullet. And to give you an idea of that, when my fibromyalgia was really at its worst, I was on 12 different medications at one time, and they all worked together in different ways to treat my pain in different ways, to improve my sleep, to treat my thyroid, to manage my headaches, all of the different symptoms and conditions that I was dealing with. Because, of course, fibromyalgia never comes by itself, right? Now, remember, when we are treating fibromyalgia, and I've mentioned this in other episodes, when we're treating fibromyalgia, we kind of have to attack it from two sides if we really want to manage it well and potentially get to where I am, where it's in remission. The first, of course, is addressing the fibromyalgia itself, that aspect of you that is amplifying those pain signals, the part of you that feels clothes on your skin and thinks that it hurts, right? There's just part of our bodies, our brains, that doesn't interpret pain correctly. And so we think that things are painful when they shouldn't be. And that amplification that fibromyalgia does, remember I always talk about it being an amplifier, that amplification part of things, we have to address. And those are primarily the medications we're going to talk about today. The other aspect of treating fibromyalgia, the other direction that we need to attack things, is treating those things that the fibromyalgia is amplifying, right? So if fibromyalgia is an amplifier, it has its own symptoms, but it's also taking anything else that you've got going on and amplifying those. So if you remember in our last episode, in episode 89, I had a conversation with my friend Melissa about our wild and crazy adventure when she was staying with me back in July. And she talked about having knee surgery and how much better her pain levels are now, not just in her knee, but everywhere. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. By taking out that painful knee, by having knee surgery, Melissa was able to remove that source of pain, and then there was nothing there for fibromyalgia to amplify. So in your life, you're also going to want to take a look at, yes, let's treat fibromyalgia, let's treat the amplifier, but we also have to treat the things it's amplifying. So you always have to look at what are the other causes of pain in your life. Now, for me, with those 12 medications, some of those, for instance, treated my thyroid and treated my headaches and some of those other causes of pain. So to dig into Sarah's question, we're going to talk about those 3 FDA-approved medications, and these are primarily designed to calm down your nervous system and to calm down that amplifier that is amplifying your pain and fatigue. The first one is the one that Sarah asked about, Lyrica. Lyrica, the generic name, is pregabalin. This is sort of an updated version of the drug Neurontin. Neurontin was the original formulation, and it had been out for many years. The generic name for that is gabapentin, which you might recognize. And after a while, drug manufacturers looking to make more money, looking to make tweaks, see if they can make the drug any better. They made some tweaks and came out with Lyrica, which was then approved for the FDA for treating fibromyalgia specifically. These 2 medications work in very, very similar ways. And if you've tried one and it didn't work for you, you had side effects or just didn't work very well, it's worth trying the other one because they do work very similarly, just some people's bodies like one better than the other. So if you've tried Lyrica and it didn't work for you, you might try Neurontin. If you tried Neurontin and it wasn't working as well as you'd like, you might try Lyrica. These two medications both work by affecting the chemicals that transmit your pain signals. One of these chemicals is called substance P. You can think P for pain. And substance P is one of those chemicals that helps the pain signals go from wherever it hurts in your body to your brain. And when we reduce substance P, it reduces how quickly those pain signals can travel and therefore reduces our experience of our pain. Now, I say it that way, our experience of our pain, because if you, for instance, have neuropathy, it's not going to regrow those nerves that are sending off those painful signals, but it is going to kind of slow those signals down from reaching your brain. So your experience, it doesn't hurt as much. Now, you might notice that pregabalin and gabapentin both have GABA as part of their chemical names, GABA. Now, GABA is a calming neurotransmitter, and it's one that we're often short of with fibromyalgia. In fact, you can think of GABA on one side of a teeter-totter and glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, on the other side of the teeter-totter. When glutamate is high, GABA is low. If you can bring GABA up, glutamate comes down. So it's like a teeter-totter. Now, these two medications, Lyrica and Neurontin, they don't affect GABA directly, but they do reduce glutamate, which then sort of has the effect of bringing GABA up. Because remember, it's like two sides of a teeter-totter there, right? So it reduces the glutamate, reduces that excitatory neurotransmitter, helping to calm down your nervous system, calm down your fight or flight, which then in turn brings up that GABA, helps to calm us down, which then actually helps a lot of our symptoms. Now, there are people who have side effects with these. The most common side effects I see on all of these medications is people gaining weight. But keep in mind that if you gain a little bit of weight, but you also gain your life back, that's kind of a good trade. Of course, depending. Now, I was once on a medication, none of these, it was a completely different medication, but I was on a medication where I gained 4 pounds a week. Now, gaining 4 pounds a week does not give you your life back. So obviously there's a limit to this. But if you gain a little bit of weight and you gain your whole life back, it can be worth taking these. That's not an automatic no for taking a medication. Now, both of these can be, as Sarah mentioned, quote, addicting. And I say quote because there's a big difference between being addicted to something and being physically dependent upon it. Now, that's a whole nother podcast episode, but just for a little bit today, being physically dependent on something simply means that your body has gotten used to being on it. And when you come off of it, there is a physiological thing that happens. You might say, I am physically dependent upon my thyroid medication because I'm taking thyroid meds to help replace what my thyroid can't do, right? And if I stop taking those thyroid meds, I am definitely going to experience some negative side effects because my body was used to getting those thyroid hormones through a pill. And it's not providing it just naturally. My thyroid can't make it. That is physical dependency. And you might find that similar with things like Lyrica and Neurontin and really any of these medications. Your body gets used to what it does for you. And if you stop it, then your body says, what the heck? And you can experience some negative effects from that. So any of these medications we're talking about today, if you do want to come back off of them, There is definitely a right and a wrong way to do that, and we want to do it gradually. Now, I'll talk about that more because it actually applies to all of them. So I'll talk about that more at the end. But yes, there can be a physical dependency. And yes, I have heard of some people being addicted. And what I mean by addicted is more of a psychological aspect. Things like you're actually changing your behavior so that you can take this medication. It might include things like hoarding the medication or daydreaming about when you can take it again, things like that. Typically, you see that more with things like opioid pain medication or other types of medications, less with these three particular meds. So moving on, Savella and Cymbalta, which are the other two FDA-approved fibro meds. Savella is milnacipran and Cymbalta is duloxetine. These both are SNRIs. Now, that stands for serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. If you don't know what all that means, in essence, these help to increase the serotonin and norepinephrine in your brain. So that part about reuptake inhibitors, it basically is creating sort of a traffic jam in your brain where those serotonin and norepinephrine molecules circulate more. They stay on the road, so to speak, stay in your system circulating. Now, serotonin and norepinephrine, they are two neurotransmitters. And yes, these are antidepressants. Savella and Cymbalta are both antidepressants. They have both been approved for fibromyalgia, but they are antidepressants like you would find other antidepressants, right? So if your doctor has prescribed you an antidepressant, they might actually be trying to improve your pain, because these two neurotransmitters do affect pain levels. So serotonin, for instance, if your serotonin is low, your pain perception will be higher. There's actually a connection between your serotonin levels and how much pain you feel. Serotonin also affects things like mood, appetite, headaches, sleep, hot flashes. Serotonin is even responsible for how quickly things move through your gut. So if you have low serotonin, you're probably constipated. So again, if your doctor's prescribing you an antidepressant, it might not just be because you're depressed. It might be because of all these other things. When I was diagnosed with IBS, the IBS-C, the constipation side of things, my doctor increased my Cymbalta. And this is why, because serotonin helps, the more serotonin helps things move through more quickly. It was actually a treatment for constipation. Norepinephrine blocks substance P. Remember, we talked about Lyrica and Neurontin working that way with reducing substance P. Norepinephrine also blocks substance P. And it also increases energy, increases focus, motivation, mood. So again, you can see that while this is an antidepressant, there are some very specific other things that it helps to address that are fibromyalgia symptoms. Now, there are other medications, antidepressants. You might see people prescribing even things as simple as Prozac, which is just a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Those work less well because they don't have the norepinephrine piece. And as you know, with fibromyalgia, we have the fatigue and the brain fog in addition to pain. And that is specifically what the norepinephrine helps to address. It helps to boost your energy and your focus. So it really helps with both energy and brain fog. There are other types of antidepressants called tricyclic antidepressants. You'll recognize these as amitriptyline and nortriptyline. These work in a different way, a third way, to help with pain. These block the NMDA receptors, the glutamate receptors that are in your spinal cord cells. and help to reduce that pain signal transmission. So again, working in a different way. So having described all of those, I think you can see why somebody might be on Lyrica and Cymbalta and amitriptyline. I was one of those people. I was on all three of those at the same time, of course, with my doctor's supervision and watching everything, because we do want to be careful with those antidepressants. Serotonin syndrome, too much serotonin is a thing, so we have to be careful. But all three of those medications work in different ways to help reduce your pain and to give you more energy, clear that brain fog. Now, again, side effects. So Cymbalta is one of the ones that I hear people have the most trouble coming off of. In fact, I've even seen class action lawsuits for, if you had problems coming off Cymbalta, you want to be part of this class action lawsuit. I don't even know if it's still going on, but I saw that a few years ago. It is known for being difficult. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is an antidepressant and it's affecting your neurotransmitters. Again, we want to be clear about the difference between addiction and physical dependency. Your brain could very well become dependent upon taking these medications, right? If you don't have enough serotonin, if you don't have enough norepinephrine, if your body just for whatever reason is not good about making those, then these could be very helpful for you. And then if you take them away, your body still doesn't make things any better. Your serotonin, your norepinephrine levels could drop like a rock. And of course, you're going to feel terrible. So we want to take all of them, any medication, we want to take coming off of them very, very gradually. Now, I'm going to give you an example, because as Sarah said, I was on these medications. I came off of all of these medications we're talking about. I'm not on any of these anymore. And I did it very slowly. Now, very slowly, let me spell out what that actually means. That means that I would reduce my medication a little bit, like one notch, let's say, because, medications all have different dosages and how you take them. So just in generic terms, if I lowered it one notch, I would stay at that level for months. I'm not talking weeks or days. I was staying at that level for several months and then making sure that I still felt good at that level, that I wasn't experiencing any of the negative side effects at that level. And once I was sure that that was good, maybe I was at that level for 6 months, I would drop it again and wait for months. So it literally took me years to come off of these medications. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about taking it slow, they're still meaning coming off within weeks or months. And that is not what we're talking about at all. We're talking really, really slow here. The other thing that I did with all of these medications is as I reduced the medication, I increased some of the supplements that helped in similar ways. So for instance, coming off of Cymbalta, I took supplements that specifically helped to raise my serotonin and raise my norepinephrine. So I did that kind of like that teeter-totter thing again, right? As the Cymbalta came down, the serotonin and norepinephrine supplements went up. With the Lyrica, as Lyrica came down, I was increasing the supplements that helped with GABA. And I've done this with several clients as well. Of course, working with their doctors, absolutely, of course, working with their doctors. But we've been able to kind of do this, raising one thing while lowering the other thing. And it really helps to limit the side effects you might have or the negative effects of coming off of these medications. The other thing, like I said, is just take your time. Be super, super slow. And to give you an example of what I mean by super slow, aside from the months and years it took me to come off these medications, I had one client who really, really wanted to come off of Lyrica. She had some side effects from that she didn't really love, but it really was helping with her pain. And so we did what I was describing a little bit ago, where she started taking supplements that would help to raise her GABA, who would work to reduce substance P and basically do similar things as to what the Lyrica did for her. And we would increase those while we were reducing the Lyrica. At one point, she was even opening up her Lyrica capsules and taking out a few of the little beads inside. So we weren't even reducing by notches, right? Like doses that you might find, but literally taking like a little bit less, a little bit more out of the capsule, a little bit more out of the capsule, so that she was reducing even more gradually. So there are lots of ways to go about this. So in terms of the question about being nervous about coming back off, if you ever had to, there are absolutely ways to do this without experiencing the negative side effects. I can tell you, coming off of Lyrica, coming off of Cymbalta, coming off of amitriptyline, coming off of tramadol, all of those medications that I stopped taking, I really never experienced any negative side effects from that because I took it so slow and I helped to support my body through additional supplements as we went along. So, like I said, Sarah, there's lots of ways to do that. I also just want to acknowledge that if you were to do a little bit of research on these medications, you will probably find a lot more evidence for the negative than you will find for the positive. And if you think about just reviews in general, right? Like, let's say restaurant reviews. It is much, much more common for somebody to complain out loud and publicly about a bad experience than they are to rave about a good experience. Everybody who takes one of these medications who doesn't have any side effects, where it works like it should and it helps, they're probably not talking about it because it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? They're out there living their lives. They're feeling better, right? But the people who try one of these medications and have a horrible experience or come off the medication and have terrible withdrawal effects, of course, they're going to complain a whole lot louder, right? So if you just were to do a quick internet survey, you're probably going to find a lot more evidence for the negative than you're going to find for the positive. So I'm just going to speak to you from my personal experience, both as somebody who has used these medications myself for many years and now doesn't. So I've done both. I've been on them. They helped. I came off of them and had to deal with that whole aspect of things. And then also speaking as somebody who has worked with clients on these medications for more than a decade. I have worked with lots of people on these medications. I can tell you that in the vast majority of the cases, these medications are more helpful than they are harmful. There's always the exception to the rule. There's always that person that, just can't tolerate being on medications or has a bad side effect. I always joke, my husband is Mr. 1%. If 1% of the people have a particular side effect, he's that 1%. And that might be you, and that's okay. In which case, you may not want to try these things. You might want to go straight to the supplements and go the more natural route. But if you're just the average person out there, these medications are probably going to help you more than they're going to hurt you. I also just want to point out that these are not Band-Aids per se, right? A Band-Aid is something that you put over your cut, but it doesn't actually heal the cut. It just protects the cut while your body's doing the healing work. These medications actually help to fix the problem in many ways by reducing the substance P, by helping to increase your serotonin or increase your norepinephrine. That said, of course, we are doing it through chemical means. Your body isn't doing it, but there may be reasons why your body can't. For instance, there are certain genetics that means your body can't make serotonin like it should. If you have that particular genetic marker, then your body is never going to be able to do it. And you are always going to need to give your body that extra help. It might be the difference between if you were born short or if you were born tall, right? If you're a short person, you may never be able to reach the top shelf in the kitchen without a stool. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how you were made. So we use a stool, right? And so if you were that person that was born and your body just doesn't make serotonin very well, then you may always be using a stool, right? You may always be taking a supplement or taking a medication that helps you do that. So these are not anything to be, ashamed of. There's no morality in taking medication. This is one of the things I talk about in episode 50 that I mentioned earlier. This is just a tool. It's just another tool, just another way to help your body feel its best so that you can then go out and live your life. I will tell you, with my clients, more often than not, I am encouraging them to take medication. And then after they get to a point where they feel good, then we start thinking about how we can get off. That's one of the things about fibromyalgia, right? It's an amplifier. So we've got to turn down that volume. We've got to calm down those things that are being amplified. And then once everything is calm, then we can look at, okay, what can we give up? What can we trade out medications for supplements? How do we start coming off of those things? And that is exactly what I did. When I was first diagnosed with fibromyalgia, literally the day at the appointment where my doctor told me I had fibromyalgia, I was already on nortriptyline and things for my thyroid and depression and things like that. But when I left her office, I had a prescription for Cymbalta. I believe I also had a prescription for Lyrica. And we just kept adding to that. She also gave me, a whole list of supplements I had to go out and buy. But I left her office with several medications right when I was diagnosed. And the whole idea is we've got to break that pain cycle with fibromyalgia. We've got to get your body calmed down. And then once we do, we can start coming back off. So many of those medications, I think the longest I was on any of them was 6 years. The shortest was probably about 3 years. So I was on all of them for about 3 years. And then I started slowly starting to come off. And 6 years later was when I fully was off of all of them. So that'll kind of give you an idea of when I mean taking your time and going slow. It was 3 years for some of them from the point where I started to come off of things. Now, there is a lot to this. Obviously, I'm just speaking at you right here. We're not having a conversation. So if you want to have a conversation, that can be super, super helpful. Your particular situation, the way you experience your symptoms, what else is going on in your life, the other conditions you might have, all of that affects which medications are going to be helpful for you. It's going to affect how you come off of them eventually. It's going to affect what supplements you might take to help support all of this. So don't be afraid to reach out and schedule a consultation. We'll have a link where you can do that in today's show notes. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/90. We'll have all of those links for you. We'll have the link to episode 50, so you can check out, should I take medication for fibromyalgia? We'll have a link to our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor training program. If you want more training like I'm doing for you today, if you want to dig deeper and learn more, that will be available. We'll also have the link where you can schedule a consultation with me or with one of my coaches. We've got a bunch of really great people who would love to have a conversation with you and help you figure out how you can honestly take back your life. There are so many ways that fibromyalgia can be treated. I really just focused on the FDA-approved meds plus Neurontin because it's so similar to Lyrica, but there's so much more. And again, we got to address fibromyalgia from both sides. We have to address the fibromyalgia using some of the medications we just talked about, but we have to address the other things too. We've got to look at your sleep. We've got to look at your thyroid, your adrenals, what other conditions you might have. Do you have autoimmune? Do you have headaches? Do you have IBS? All of these things play in together, and we have to look at it all. There is just so much that can be done. And most doctors out there, unfortunately, don't know how to treat this, unfortunately. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. There is so much more we will be covering in upcoming episodes. We've got a lot of really great things planned for you. In the meantime, please reach out if you have any questions. I love getting your questions. It helps me for our Ask the Coach, and I also just love having conversations. See you next time. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stacklehouse. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.